Good evening. It's Bob here. Welcome to the Highway Podcast. And tonight, our guest is Luke Mannion, hailing all the way from Dorchester down in Devon. Runs a very successful full-time gym. So when did we meet? It was a few years ago now, wasn't it?
Yeah, late 90s. It was when you were doing the USP courses up at Nuneaton.
That's right. Yeah, that was one of the first, I think that was one of the first USP courses I'd done. I've been teaching self-protection for quite a while, but sort of formalized it. So I remember, yeah, there was you, Richard Grannon, there was a few people on it, wasn't it?
Yeah, that's right.
A small group, but it was a good little course, that.
Yeah.
And we sort of had some mutual interests. We sort of clicked, and you went on to do Muay Thai with me and other stuff. But prior to that, you've already got a history of having done martial arts, haven't you?
Yeah, so I started off probably when I was about 14, properly with martial arts, and
right.
I think everyone back then it was Taekwondo and Karate.
Yeah.
So I kind of worked my way through those systems. Went into the military, went into the paras, and quickly found out that when you're rolling around the floor with a bloke from Glasgow, your Taekwondo doesn't really work. And after that, kind of went into more of the Muay Thai.
So can I just stop you there? You rolled around on the floor with a lot of men from Glasgow. Is that like part of selection for the parachute regiment?
I believe that's more for the Royal Marines, but it does happen for the paras. Yeah.
Ooh, okay. All right. I know a few people would be interested in that. Sorry, go
on. Completely lost my track now. So once I joined the paras, I started looking more. Looking more at things like jiu-jitsu, judo, Thai boxing, normal boxing, the more sort of pragmatic systems.
Right. Okay. So you got qualified in Taekwondo, yeah?
Yeah, got up to black belt in Taekwondo.
Okay.
And I was actually on the combined service team in the military as well for Taekwondo.
So you competed obviously for the paras, yeah?
Yeah, so the way it works with the military sport is you start off and you represent your battalion if you go to an army championship. So I would represent, and get what they call your battalion colours or your regimental colours. Then if you go to the tri-services, which is when the army team fights the Navy and the Air Force, then you get your army colours because you're representing the army. And then the final stage is the combined services. So take the best guys out of the Army, Navy and Air Force team. And then you sort of fight international teams. So I got to there with Taekwondo.
Right. Okay. Yeah. So you've got sort of quite a competition career behind you with Taekwondo.
Yeah, I did a lot of Taekwondo back in the Army because, it got me out of a lot of work. So it was quite a good number.
Yeah.
And I've sort of competed, did a little bit of MMA, did a couple of Thai boxing fights, couple boxing, couple kickboxing. A little bit of competing. And obviously with judo and jiu-jitsu, you have to fight for your grades anyway. So
yeah, because you did judo as well, didn't you?
That's right. Yeah, so I got black belt in judo. I got that about 4 years ago now, I think.
Right. Okay. Okay.
And judo is a really good system because there are different ways to do it, but when you compete for your grades, basically, if you beat all the other brown belts, you must be a black belt. It's like a real simple system. So I got my black belt through competing in judo. So
you have to So what you're saying is you have to prove yourself. It's not just about, jumping through the hoops, as it were, and just ticking the boxes of a grading syllabus.
Yeah, no, you can do it that way. You can have what's called a technical grading. So, if you've got someone who's 60.
Yeah.
When you start judo, you've got to have an alternate system. But when you go down the competition route, that's the more sort of prestigious way to do it.
Yeah. A bit like Muay Thai, really, because obviously you get a lot of older guys who, are too old to compete, but they still want to develop as a Thai boxer.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you have a more technical approach to the whole thing, don't you?
Yeah, that's it. Yeah.
Yeah, which makes a lot more sense and gives everybody an opportunity to develop in the art. All right. And out of Taekwondo and Judo, which did you prefer?
Judo, hands down. it's the only martial art where you hit someone with the planet. It's fantastic art. I mean, I'm not the biggest fan of Taekwondo, if I'm completely honest, even though I did it for so long. I found it, I couldn't irritate people this, but I didn't really learn how to kick until I did Muay Thai. And I didn't really learn to punch until I did boxing. So the Taekwondo didn't give me a huge amount, I don't think, if I'm honest. I think the rule set is so specific with it. It doesn't really lend itself to anything outside of those rules.
Yeah. Well, it's very much a sport, isn't it?
Oh, massively, yeah.
So, and each organisation has different rules, I guess, as well.
Yeah, so you've got two main styles of Taekwondo. You've got the WTF, which is the Olympic one. So that's where they wear like the chest protectors, and they're not allowed to punch to the head. It's full contact, so they can punch to the body and they can kick to the head. And then you've got ITF, which is the semi-contact one. So you can punch to the face and kick to the head as well, but it's supposed to be semi-contact.
Unlike Thai boxing, of course, the kicks are flicked, aren't they, really?
Yeah, totally. Because the big difference between Taekwondo, karate, and Muay Thai is that all the extension from the kick comes from the knee joint, whereas with Muay Thai, you're hitting with the hip.
Yeah.
And if you look at any sport, one of the ways that, well, the only way you can generate power is going from core to extremity. So if I throw a javelin, my hip moves through before my arm. If I go to kick a football, my hip goes through the core before the foot. Whereas with Taekwondo, it goes the opposite way. The leg comes up and you flick from the knee joint. So it's never going to be as powerful as a Muay Thai kick, where your hip goes through and then the leg slightly extends afterwards.
And of course, I think, because I did karate from an early age, and I think a lot of my knee problems come from those days of ballistically flicking my leg out from the knee. Because, when I started Thai, as you say, it's a completely different way of kicking. You're using your body to generate power as opposed to the lower leg, which obviously in itself has no intrinsic power. It can slap and it can hurt, but it can't do serious damage. Well, you wouldn't, if it did, it would break your foot.
Yeah. The thing is, when you do strength and conditioning, they talk about the kinetic chain. So like again, same with like Olympic weightlifting, it's your core and then the extremity and you're dropping underneath the bar. Yeah. Whereas Taekwondo, they just go complete, and karate go completely against that. The only style I've sort of tasted that it made sense to do it that way was Savat, because they use the point of the shoe like a little pick. So to bring that knee up and kick that way makes perfect sense with the shoe. Yeah. But it doesn't make any sense when you're doing it barefoot.
Yeah, Savat's an interesting one, isn't it? Because in a sense, it's like a Western Muay Thai in a way.
Yeah.
I mean, one of my ex-students from years ago also was a Golden Gloves Savat champion as well. Okay. And he made a transition from Muay Thai to Nigel Trotman. He's been on these podcasts.
Yeah, I know Nigel.
Yeah, of course you do. So Nigel's been on these podcasts. I'm going to get him back on again to talk more about Savat. Because I've been chatting to a few people about Savat. Tommy Joe Moore was on talking about Savat as well. And, a lot of the pragmatic guys, the ones who want to make this thing work, have all tried a bit of Savat. And I'm sort of a bit upset I never had a go myself, but I was never given the opportunity. I don't know whether I would have got anything out of it personally. I don't know, just the curiosity value. And, of course, they've got the weapons with it, Lacan. And,
that's right.
It's like a complete system in a way.
Yeah. I mean, I enjoyed it because it was a different way to kick. And it was extremely interesting learning how to kick with a shoe. So, like, when they do a side kick, the toes slightly elevated. So instead of hitting with the side of the foot, you're hitting with the heel. Yeah. Because it's a strong part of the shoe. All that kind of stuff really, really makes sense. I didn't particularly like the movement with it.
Right.
I found that if you didn't know Savat was French, you could watch it and you'd know it was French.
Right.
Just by the way they move. Whereas I prefer like the more sort of direct Muay Thai movement. Really.
I think Muay Thai's got a more square on stance and tends to be more in your face, quite literally. I mean, what I've seen of Savat is very balletic.
Yes, definitely.
Which is probably fitting with what you said about it being very French.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Yeah. Very graceful, very classical. Yeah. A bit like their sword fencing, to be fair.
Yeah, totally.
as opposed to crazy Scottish broadsword where you just hack into everybody.
Yeah.
So you got your black belt obviously in judo about 4 years ago.
Yeah.
So, but you've been doing it a long time.
Yeah. Judo and Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu I've done for quite a while. I started off with no-gi. I did a lot of no-gi grappling, and then sort of transitioned into the gi after that, which was quite challenging actually.
Well, right. I'm going to act as devil's advocate here. What's this no-gi and gi thing, just for those that have not?
So the gi is the suit, the judo suit.
Yeah.
So no-gi grappling is normally done in a rash guard or a t-shirt and shorts.
So you're holding the body as opposed to the garment.
Yeah. And then gi grappling is obviously with the jacket and the trousers. Now, no-gi generally tends to be a little bit quicker.
Right.
But gi gives you more submissions because you can use the suit to submit people. That's
you can put chokes on and things like that with the garment on the ground.
I mean, if you're any good at it, you should be able to do both. You know, if you think you're very good at jiu-jitsu and then it just falls apart because you're taking your jacket off, you're not very good at jiu-jitsu. The principles are the same. And I found the same when I went from no-gi to gi. I found my control and my weight distribution was very, very good because I was used to not having any grips. But it just slowed the game right there. And I initially felt very much like I was in some sort of straitjacket because, you know, I'd try and do something and move, but there was always a hand there just grabbing hold of the jacket or the trousers. And the takedowns are completely different as well, because obviously when you do no-gi, it's more wrestling based. And then you go to gi and it's all about the grips. And it's very, very, I mean, I went to judo and I've been grappling for quite a long time, but I hadn't done any gi whatsoever. And I went there and I sort of I tapped out a couple of the black belts on the ground. We started off on the ground and then we stood up and I was like, right guys, I said, I know what I'm doing on the ground. I said, I haven't got a clue standing up with a jacket. And they obviously thought I was bullshitting. And I was just smashed down for about the first 15 minutes and they kind of went, okay, you're telling the truth, aren't you? So yeah, I am. And then they started teaching me then. But yeah, it's great art. I love judo. I mean, I love all grappling really. It was really interesting listening to what Zane was saying about the battlefield arts starting from the over-unders. Really, I've never heard that. That was really interesting.
Yeah, I mean, Zane's got a lot of stuff to say about Highland wrestling, backhold wrestling, Mongolian wrestling, the whole thing. He knows a lot about the history of just grappling generally. And we were talking off air, I think, about how there's no records, obviously, but it looks like, you know, it goes way back to what prehistory. Because men would tend to grab and maul each other than punch, because obviously you break your hands when you punch things. The hands are not designed to strike things. They're designed to grip. So wrestling makes perfect sense from a really basic level. And it's probably what men, after hitting people with clubs, having a tool or a weapon, it's probably get hold of them. And of course in broadsword and saber, there's a lot of control and command where you get hold, you know, you get in close range. You can't use your sword at that range. You might use the pommel of the sword, but you've got to be able to sweep. You've got to be able to throw people. You've got to be able to control their arms, you know, and their garments to a certain extent. You know, the whole thing, it's quite fascinating, all those threads coming together, you know, because when people say, you know, what's the most, you know, you hear it's a question that's been asked since I was a kid in martial arts. What's the best martial art? Well, there isn't such a thing. It's about the guy doing it. And normally the guy who does it has a blend of things.
Totally.
The ability to use weapons at hand, the ability to strike, usually with open hands and elbows, and the ability, obviously, to grab and throw or control. You know, like in Muay Thai, although it's not a grappling art per se, it does have a lot of grappling in it.
Oh, massively. And I found that the clinch work from Muay Thai helped me loads when I did no-gi grappling. And especially the style that we do, where we're looking at the arm and the neck as opposed to the pommel. It made a huge difference. But I think going back to what you're saying, I think one of the things that a lot of people miss now with martial arts is the aim is to be, you know, functional at all ranges with or without a weapon. And, you know, I think what the way to achieve that is by stripping everything back rather than layering more and more on, and sort of be a little bit of a jack of all trades rather than and a master in just one, because you know you can be the best taekwondo guy in the world. You fall over, you're screwed.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Yeah. But I mean, that's it's a very pragmatic and military way of doing things.
Yeah.
Because as you know yourself from being in the military, standard operation procedures were always very, very simple things that you drilled time and time and time again. And the funny thing is, they work really well.
Yeah.
Virtually all of the time.
Yeah.
You know, and to a certain extent, some of the martial arts now, and it's been a process that's been going on for a long time, have got more and more complex. And I think that's hand in hand with the monetization of it all.
Yeah, definitely.
And as it's got monetized, you start to struggle. You think, well, I've got to continue teaching these students, so I need more stuff to sell, as it were.
Yeah.
Which is why I think you've got a lot of clubs now who are MMA, Taekwondo, Muay Thai, Judo. They're literally, it's like you've got so many choices. It's ridiculous.
And I think as well, I think the problem is, even with traditional martial arts, is like the belt system. So, you know, like when you do Taekwondo or karate, you know, you white belt, you have to learn these techniques, and yellow belt, you have to learn these, and it's just pile upon pile upon pile. Whereas when you do Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, you tend to learn a lot of stuff over the first few belts, but then as you get to a later stage, you start stripping back and creating your own game.
Yeah.
And when you look at Muay Thai, I mean, you pretty much got it down after 6 months.
6 months, yeah.
You know the techniques. You're not proficient at them, or you know, world class at by any stretch of imagination. But you know, there's 6 punches, and there's some elbows, and some knees, and some round kicks. It's not like Taekwondo where you've suddenly got to do tornado kicks and layer upon layer upon layer.
And forms and katas.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, all of that sort of thing.
Yeah.
You know, it's like they're creating a problem for themselves in many ways.
Yeah.
It's a bit like Jeet Kune Do. You know, the original idea was brilliant. Strip everything away to get out of the classical mess. But you look at Jeet Kune Do now, and it's a morass of different systems, and it's like, you know, I mean, I probably won't make any friends saying this, but it's become so complex. It's probably gone so far away from its original intention. You know, and you see that happening with a lot of things. You know, basic systems. You think the instructor thinks, how can I make more money out of this? I need to expand it more, so I'm going to add more and add more and add and add, and it just becomes so confusing.
Yeah, I mean, it's like boxing. You know, what have they added to boxing? You know, it's the same 6 punches.
Yeah, it hasn't really changed at all.
You know,
I mean, the rules have got tighter purely to protect the participants. But if you look back to, you know, the days like Queensberry rules and stuff like that, you know, well, what could you do with boxing? Well, I mean, they allowed headbutts, I believe, you know.
They used to wrestling as well.
Yeah, and they took the biting and the headbutts out, and then it was bare knuckle. Then they protected the hands, so they didn't die. You know, so it became more of a sport, but it's essentially remained the same. Yeah, the same moves, and Muay Thai's about the same as well. The sport, like you see, is generally more or less close to what they were doing, you know, sort of 80, 90 years ago in Thailand, maybe 100 years ago.
I remember seeing an MMA fight once, and it was a Salat guy against I think it was some style of Kung Fu. And they were either side of the cage, and they were doing all their movements, practicing it. And then as soon as they scrapped, it was exactly the same. And then they broke, they started doing the stuff in thin air again. And then it was just like...
It's funny, isn't it? When you watch it, it's like, they probably can't see through the irony of it all.
Yeah.
And you see these masters fighting. I mean, there's quite a few famous ones on YouTube, but, you know, they're Chi masters who fighting MMA or fighting a Thai boxer.
Yeah.
Come out and they're doing all these Qi Gong exercises like that. And then the fight starts and they just do that.
Yeah, totally. Yeah.
And they don't know what to do.
Yeah.
You know, and it's bizarre that people will continue to do these things without thinking. Yeah. I don't know. It's something about the human psyche. They don't want to have to think. They want to be given, no, the master said, do it like this. You just do it. You know, my first karate instructor, Danny Shiganis, was really good like that, because although he was teaching Wado-ryu karate, and I remember him 10, 11, when I was 10 or 11 year old, like, and he was saying, this is not a block, this is a smash to the face.
Yeah, totally.
Agayuki was not or block. He said, don't work like that. Smash him in the face with it, edge of the arm, and then hit him. But he was an old crane driver and a bit of a lad, I think, in his day. And he'd done boxing and he'd found karate and gone to Japan. And of course, it's exotic, isn't it? That you wear the gis, you do the movements. But he still, he still kept it pretty pragmatic. And he had us doing old school things like punching Makiwara boards. Because he said, your hand's not designed to punch, so we've got to toughen it, make it like a hammer. And yet we did palm heel strikes as well, but not as much as punching. So,
well, I think there's a huge misconception as well with what the katas actually are. There's some really good guys like Ian Abernethy, and I think he calls it kata bunkai.
Bunkai, it's bunkai. Yeah. It's a goju. Goju, bunkai's been around a long time, and it's people like Ian, actually Harry Cook as well, saying no more, was also doing a lot of bunkai. Patrick McCarthy in the States. And I mean, Goju, from the first time I started Goju, we were doing bunkai. You do a kata and then you do the bunkai for it. You had to do the kata with somebody else, Well,
I mean, it was like when I was doing taekwondo. I got taught there was one part of in one of the katas. I can't remember what they're called now in taekwondo. But someone's coming up with an overhead stroke, so you do your X block, and then somehow your spider sense kicks in and you realise someone's about to kick you in the balls from behind. So you turn around and then do that movement, like the X block downwards. And that's how I was always taught it until I started reading books. And actually what they're saying is that's a cross collar grip into a headbutt, and then you're throwing the guy to the floor.
Yeah.
And you look at that and you think, that actually makes perfect sense. But the fact that you're fighting two guys and I don't know, you must have seen the reflection in the other guy's eye or something. And, being able to turn around and block the low kick, it's just.
Well, if you look at Japanese kata, Japanese like Shotokan, Shukakai, and Wariryu, and so on, and you look at where they came from, which was Okinawa, and you look at Goju, which came from China, sort of Pangai Nun, another history lesson altogether. The Goju is shorter stances, tighter movements, close grip, lots of grabbing like this, and short punches, like close range palm heel strikes. Makes a lot more sense. But when it transferred itself across to Japan, it started to become, it turned into it was for schools, it was in colleges, so it had to be regimented and ordered. And the Japanese love form, they have their aesthetic is about form. Okinawa is slightly different because they're not Chinese, they're not Japanese, they're very much their own, and they had their own way of doing, Nahate or Goju, some of the systems of that period. And it's funny you were talking about grades, because back then, the time of Miyagi and Kenwa Mabuni, I believe, the early 1800s and so on, there was no belt systems at all. It was just like a white belt and a black belt, you know what I mean? Yeah. That was it. You trained and you're a teacher now, you've been doing it a long time, there's your black belt.
Yeah.
But of course, they decided to have, and they stole the structure actually from Jigoro Kano, from judo.
Okay.
The structure, the grading system, I believe, came from Jigoro Kano, the judo guy, because he had set up this grading system, It's funny how all these things interlink, when you look closely at them. Then it's not a straightforward, like we say, it's not as straightforward.
Well, it's even when you follow lineage from Japanese jiu-jitsu into judo, then into Brazilian jiu-jitsu, they've all come from the same place. Yeah. They just morphed. But I think, like you say, most people don't. I don't think they understand where their martial arts kind of sits in the broad spectrum of things. So, like at my club, we teach that you break martial. There's three types of martial art. There's traditional martial arts, there's sport martial arts, and then there's like reality martial arts, like the Krav and that kind of stuff. And I tell you what, I've got a whiteboard here, and I'll take you through it. So like the way we teach it at my gym is that we have a triangle here, and sport martial arts are up here, traditional ones are down here, and then you've got reality. And obviously with the traditional ones, you're trying to replicate someone else's style generally. You'll do your punch in taekwondo, and then it will karate, and they'll move your hand to the left because your imaginary opponent was in the wrong spot. Whereas with sport stuff, it's more about you creating your own style. So you have your own style of Muay Thai, your own style of boxing, and pretty much every martial art will sit somewhere on this triangle. So if we look at, say, Olympic Taekwondo, I would put that one straight here. halfway in between the sport and the traditional, because it hasn't got any reality aspect of it. You can't use it in a fight. But you've got, it's an Olympic sport, and it has got the katas, so it's traditional. And obviously, if you had something like Krav Maga, you'd put it right here on this corner, because it hasn't really got a traditional aspect like reforms and katas, and it hasn't got a sporting aspect that I know of. So it kind of sits there, and it's a nice way to sort of explain to people where martial arts sits, and just give them an outline of the bigger picture, really.
So, I mean, when you have new people coming to your club, when we could, back in the good old days, a year ago, is that the sort of thing you say? What is it you're looking for?
Yeah, well, we do quite a lot of theory at my club. So, especially with the jiu-jitsu as well, sort of explaining it and breaking it down, because I think there's a lot of misconceptions with Brazilian jiu-jitsu. But yeah, most new members, I take them through that and show them where all the different martial arts would sit, because depending on what your goal is with training, it can help you sort of determine the best martial art to learn.
So if you coming back, the best martial art to learn, right? What would be your favorite best martial art?
If I was gonna teach my kids something, I'll kind of rephrase the question. I would teach them some style of sport-based grappling and some style of sport-based striking. Yeah. And I wouldn't really be too fussed if it's judo, jiu-jitsu, sambo, and I wouldn't be too fussed if it was normal boxing, Muay Thai, maybe K1. But it's got to be something that you do against a non-compliant partner. That's the big difference with it. Because really, you don't need that many ways to hit somebody, or that many ways to take someone down to the floor. You don't need a few ways to do it, but you need to be able to do it against people that are resisting. And that's, again, one of the big problems with traditional martial arts is so much of it is against a compliant partner. They'll do their punch and then they'll kick, and it's just fantasy. It doesn't work. So anything that's sport-based, really, I think, for me, I think in my mind, I would teach some sport-based. So you had a fight, they had a bit of rough and tumble with judo or boxing. Then I'd teach them the self-protection stuff. And then if they wanted to do a traditional martial art after that, it's up to them. I did a little bit of capoeira. We had someone teaching at my club. It was only for about 6 weeks. And it was good fun. I could do capoeira for the sake of doing capoeira. I didn't have that niggling down in my head with this work outside the chip shop, because I know what works outside the chip shop. And I was just doing capoeira because I was doing capoeira. So yeah, it kind of helps with that sort of thing.
That's the thing with kids as well. I mean, sometimes I see people teaching kids like Krav Maga or self-protection or whatever, and you think, well, honestly, really? Just give them a sport, give them a bit of fun. With my kids, I sent them to judo initially. Yeah. And they had great fun. I wasn't a judo player, but I saw the value in it for, two young lads grabbing each other. Because as kids, you just wrestle, don't you? That's what you do. Strangely enough, isn't it? It's what you do. Yeah. You end up right at the core, right from being a young kid. I never remember punching anybody in a fight until I got older, until I learned karate, until somebody taught me to punch. Yeah. And you used to watch lads punching like that, and their hands would be wrecked. And it was all grappling. It was all and headlocks, and you get somebody in a headlock and you didn't know what to do. Like, so you punch them in the top of the head, and then you do that because you break your hands. Like, and it's funny, isn't it? It all comes back to grappling,
See, and I find with Krav Maga, it's a bit of a funny one as well. And I haven't got a huge amount of experience of Krav. I've done a little bit. And I did Kapap as well. I did a weekend course with that, and that was very good. But the thing is with the Krav, and I went to a local club and did some, and they were nice people there, and they moved okay. But the thing is with the Krav, you do your drills, and someone would put you in a headlock. So then you had to pretend to smash their groin. But you're not actually smashing their groin, you're just pretending to smash their groin.
Pretending to.
And then at some point, that person has to pretend it hurt enough that they'd let you go.
Yeah. And
it's kind of, hang on a minute, you're actually going back to that traditional stuff. Whereas when I did the Kapap, and I can't remember the guy's name, but he was very good, a guy came over from Israel. And it was all very wrestling based, very sort of striking based. And you had some guys there that were really good, and they looked great on the self-protection drills. And then when you did some kickboxing drills, they lacked it. And he said, you need to practice your kickboxing and your jiu-jitsu. And I think when you look at all the different kind of martial arts sort of combined systems, so you have, say, MMA. Everyone who does MMA, well, not everyone, but the majority of people that do MMA do Thai boxing, they do jiu-jitsu, they do wrestling, they do judo. Anyone who's any good, they do those. And they might substitute, the jiu-jitsu for sambo, but it's that system. And then you look at Jeet Kune Do. The guys that are any good at Jeet Kune Do do Thai boxing, they do Brazilian jiu-jitsu, they do boxing, wrestling, they have Kali, and so Wing Chun. And then you look at the guys that are really good at Krav Maga, they do Brazilian jiu-jitsu, they do boxing, they do Muay Thai. And there's
a theme, isn't there?
Yeah, there's a very common theme that the sport-based stuff that works against a non-compliant partner works. And it just translates to everything. And when you see the guys that can't do that, they're generally not that good.
Yeah. I have a friend of mine, Gaz, who I'm going to get on here at some point, a Geordie lad who lives just on the other side of Birmingham. He's an ex, bodyguard and real interesting character. He's just written a book on the subject. I'm going to get him on at some point.
Okay.
But he used to dress up in the Red Man kit.
Oh, yeah.
And help out at various self-protection type courses. And he said he was in the Red Man suit, obviously. And he said, if I'd wanted to, I would have just killed them all. He said, because I was told, don't go too hard on them.
Yeah.
He said, because you'll injure someone. Now, you're teaching 6.5 stone Tina how to fight against a 6 foot bloke.
Yeah.
And she thinks she can because she fought Gaz in a Red Man suit.
Yeah.
And Gaz said, well, basically she was hitting me. And although I've got the suit on, I know if somebody's got power or not. And he said, there was a couple of times I could have just picked these guys up and girls, just picked them up and slammed them on the floor and they would be dead.
Yeah.
And he's not a big lad. He's not much bigger than me, but he's been a bodyguard. I mean, seriously, never been military, but hard as nails.
Yeah.
Not scared of anybody, but a lovely guy, So he complied and he gave up. He gave up doing it because he felt he was. He said to me just a few years ago, and I'm sure he hasn't changed his opinion. He said he felt like he was shortchanging people. I'm sort of part of the lie. I'm actually being compliant. These poor people think they can fight me.
Yeah.
But they couldn't. And he's not like a highly skilled martial artist, even, but he's just tough.
Well,
and of course, when you come across, that's it. When you come across somebody who's genuinely nuts, I don't care what martial art you do, unless you can match that level of madness. You're really on it. Well, you're serving the paras, so you know exactly what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
If you don't, I know for a fact, that in the paras you're taught aggression, intent. You hold your weapon across your body. You look like you fucking mean it.
Yeah.
You don't slovenly walk around going, "Oh, you're right." It's like fucking gets. You know what I'm talking about.
Yeah, totally.
And I mean, you've been to Bosnia, you've been to Africa, you've done your tours, and so you know what violence is actually about. And people are not nice.
Of course they're not.
People are not fucking nice. People will kill people. I mean, what are your thoughts on like sort of edge weapon stuff?
Same thing, really. It should be simple. Like when I look at, I did Kali with Moteague, and Mo's great. Can't recommend Moteague enough. And his Kali is so kind of simple and condensed. It's really, really good. But you see some Kali, and it's such a complicated mess. And it's just like, you look at the HEMA stuff. There's 10 lessons.
Yeah.
So, but again, we do the Kali, and there's layers and there's grades, and it's more and more and more stuff. And all of a sudden, at some level, they forget that the stick is supposed to simulate a machete. It's supposed to simulate a bladed weapon. So suddenly they're doing all these locks with the stick, and you're like, hang on a minute, you just chopped your arm off and you've done
it. Yeah.
It should be very similar to the HEMA in that respect.
I agree.
But like with the edge stuff, Moteague was really good. He's some of the best knife stuff I've actually done was with him. But again, you look at some of the knife defense stuff, and it's just fantasy. It's just comical, and it's like you're going to get people killed if you teach them that.
Exactly, and dangerous. And the other thing is when you see people doing these, and over the years I've seen them, they'll say, "I can strip the weapon off you, and then I've got your weapon." I go, "Then what do you do?" And I go, "Well, I stab you." I go, "Would you?" And you look at them, they couldn't have
No.
the, I mean, it's a well-known fact that a lot of soldiers in battle won't necessarily shoot at the target. They certainly didn't in the First World War, and some of them in the Second World War didn't.
Well, that was Grossman's work. So one of the things he was saying, it was about distance. So physical and social and emotional distance. So it's easier to kill a guy by dropping a drone bomb than it is to put a bayonet into somebody. There's less PTSD, there's less trauma.
Yeah.
And basically, the further you get away from the target, the less difficulty there is in doing it. So it's easier if you're a sniper than actually putting a.
Well, because they're not human.
That's
you
it.
don't see them as a human being.
Yeah, and the second that kind of goes on to the social aspect of it, which is why there's so much racism, against the enemy. And you go back all the way through time, that was the case. You've got Tommy, you've got Jerry, you've got Charlie, you've got Hodges, all these different terms that the military use, because it's easier to kill 3 Hodges than it is 3 fathers or 3 sons. So if you can create that physical distance and that social distance, it makes it easier to be able to do your job. You can disconnect more.
Yeah, the whole culture of the British Empire, the reason the British Empire was so successful was because they dehumanized the Far East.
Yeah, absolutely.
They weren't human. The Indians in the subcontinent in Asia were given derogatory titles. They were lower than scum, lower than dogs. So the British soldiers would go across and treat them like shit.
Yeah, totally.
And that was a deliberate policy
to
dehumanize people so that we could conquer their countries.
Yeah.
And that's always been the case, Even when we fought the French, even now, some British people have got a thing against the French.
Oh yeah, they're still garlic munching surrender monkeys, aren't they?
Yeah, and this serves to divide people. It's like calling the Irish paddies. It allowed us to basically allow one group of working class people to starve another working class group. And the only people who benefited from it were the rich, and that comes into a whole other ballpark altogether, that's another subject in itself. So the edge weapons, for example, in HEMA, keep it simple, stupid. It's a simple SOP, And
absolutely.
And it works beautifully. But of course, that doesn't often fill a gym unless you've got die-hard martial artists who understand the importance of simplicity. It's difficult to sell simplicity, I think.
Yeah.
I've spent most of my life doing it, which is why I'm not a millionaire, Yeah.
We almost want a very minimalist approach to your martial arts. You want to kind of strip it back to what's essential and then drill the shit out of that rather than these superfluous techniques.
Yeah.
But going back to what you were saying about people stripping knives and what you can do, you can stab someone. Like most people haven't got the mindset for that. They're not brought up that way.
That's why people get mugged and beaten up in the street.
Of course, yeah.
Because if you look at the people who do the beating up, they're not particularly skilled themselves. Right. They've just got the intent to do it.
Yeah. There was a great quote, and I can't remember who I heard it off. It said that most people can go into a gym and hit a punch bag and imagine it's a man. But not many people can hit a man and imagine it's a punch bag.
No.
To be able to humanize someone that much that they can do what they need to do.
Yeah.
And most people, I think they live in a fancy world. They watch too much Jason Bourne. All this stuff. And, the reality, even if you did it, even if you did stab somebody, you're looking at, and it's totally a clean kill and, it's justified within the law. You're still looking at 5 years of court trials and stress and, the breakdown of your family and God knows what and how much legal bills that's going to cost. I mean, it's.
Well, this is what people do as well, because when they come to you, and I'm sure you've had it and I've had it, where they say, when I'm teaching self-protection, I go, well, if you do that, won't you get into trouble with the law? And I'll go, well, I don't worry about that until later.
Yeah.
Most people go, well, I could end up in prison. I could end up and say, oh, you could be dead, of course. Yeah, but if I did that to someone, I'd get in trouble. And it's like difficult getting beyond that mindset, that actually, the old saying, better to be judged by 12 than carried by 6.
Yeah, and I think it's too late on the day to make that decision. You need to have made that decision before anything like that happens. Like in the military, you carry a rules of engagement card. So if the enemy's firing at you, you can fire back. If they, depending on where you are. If they drop their weapons and run, you're not allowed to fire at them anymore. Certainly that's how it was in Ireland. But that's how that Tony Martin guy went down, because it was when the guys were running away that he fired at them and killed the guy, and that's why he went down for it. So I think you almost have to have your own rules of engagement worked out in your head. You know, if this guy's got a knife, I will do this. Yeah. If this guy hasn't got a knife, I won't do that, because it's very dependent on the individual with the law. You know, so if someone breaks into my house and they're unarmed and I stab them, I'm probably going to, well, I won't go down for it, because they will definitely find knives on them afterwards. But I would go down. Yeah,
allegedly.
But I would go down for that. Whereas if the same scenario was for my, 87-year-old gran, she'd get away with it, because that was all she could do in her powers. It's reasonable force, and that's based on the individual.
And this is what people need to understand. And it's become more prevalent now. Good self-protection instructors will talk about the law and your position in the law. Yeah. I used to bring Carl in when Carl, my son, when he first became a cop, he came on a couple of self-protection courses to give a lawgiver's point of view on it. Yeah. And it was pretty straightforward, if you remember. And it was, if you can justify your action will be justified, Yeah. It's been able to justify the action. Yeah. So if someone is running away from you, you chase them and stab them, then it's not going to look good, no matter how angry you were at the time. But if they're trying to stab you, then that's different. Yeah. That it's a completely different thing.
I mean, for anyone who does self-protection, if you don't understand the Criminal Law Act and you haven't got some knowledge of first aid and trauma stuff, you're only sort of doing the tip of the iceberg, really.
It's a good point that you make. A lot of people who teach knife fighting and so on, they wouldn't have a clue how to administer first aid.
No, exactly.
Not a clue. So even if they got stabbed and they survived the confrontation, would they know how to stem bleeding? Would they know what to do? Do they know how to put a tourniquet on correctly? Yeah. There's just simple things. I mean, I used to spend a bit of time teaching that sometimes to people. What if I get stabbed? Okay, right. This is what you do with a pressure, with a sucking chest wound. This is what you should do, etc., and so on, with slashes and cuts and this sort of thing. And of course, there's a trauma of being slashed and cut. And I've heard a number of people on different courses saying, "Oh, you won't feel it." Like, well, I've seen people do the opposite of that.
Yeah.
Had their arm slashed up and they've looked at it and nearly collapsed with shock.
Yeah.
So
it's like when you get a cut in the head, you don't realize how much blood there actually is. And yeah, I mean, it will have a psychological effect on you.
Absolutely. First time I got hit with an elbow and it was piss and blood there, it stopped me.
Yeah.
I was only 18 or 19. I got cut and I was like, oh, what? And I thought, I've got to stop. Yeah. I felt like the gash was like from there to there. It was actually just a tiny little cut, and it was pissing out. Yeah. And it's psychological conditioning. You see, the military are very good at doing that, as you say. Martial arts are not, because it's not sexy.
Yeah.
When you've got mixed groups like families and kids and stuff, trying to hit them with reality, you end up losing most of your students.
Yeah.
Or a lot of them anyway. Yeah. And it depends on what you're trying to achieve with your club. If you're running a commercial club, just be honest, it's commercial, we do sport. Yeah. Realize the limitations of what we're doing. I mean, which was I've had good instructors in my time, and they always said, well, there's limits to what you do with karate. There are limits, and a lot of those limits are psychological.
Yeah, totally.
Because I know guys who do karate couldn't fight their way up a paper bag, but I do know one or two people who do karate who could, you're a dead man, but that's because they've got a strong attitude to what they do.
I mean, it's like you're saying, like in 99 when I was in Kosovo, I mean, how old was I then? I just literally turned 18 when I went to Kosovo. And they used to take us, we'd go on patrol, and they used to take us to the morgue. So we'd go down and have a look at like the bodies and the entry wounds, the exit wounds, and it's just getting you conditioned to that, so that when you come across it, it's not quite as horrific. And I think, like myself, I think I had less trouble than a lot of the lads do now with kind of PTSD and stuff, is because I was slowly conditioned over the different ops I did. So I went to Kosovo, and it was a peacekeeping op mainly. But you saw the sort of the back of the ethnic cleansing. and then I went to Sierra Leone. So I went to Sierra Leone, and again, that was quite graphic. There was a lot of kids with their hands chopped off and all that kind of stuff. And then I went and did the hostage rescue in Sierra Leone with the SAS, and that was full on, but it was 4 hours. That was all. By the time we landed on the ground, 4 hours later, we were having a beer on the ship. So it was full on, but it was a very short exposure. And then when I did Northern Ireland. That was pretty useless by then. And then when I went and did Iraq, Telic 1, I'd already had all those little incremental increases in pressure and what you'd seen. So it didn't affect me so much. But I think these poor lads, when they're 17, 18, and they get sent to Afghan, and suddenly they're in a fob and they're getting shelled and mortared day after day, that's going to have that toll because they haven't had those little incremental
those increments, being hardened gradually, sort of thing.
Yeah, and I think I was very lucky, when I joined that. I joined at that time, and I had that. It definitely helped.
Yeah, and linking that, it's not as stressful, but linking that to like Thai boxing. This is the good thing about interclubs. It's like building it up to competitive level.
Yeah.
So the interclub should be fairly controlled, but it gets you over that initial fear of being hit and hitting somebody else.
Yeah.
And then and you see lads transformed over a period of time, over a couple of years of interclubs and then competitions, and you see the standard going up, and they get to a point where they actively enjoy the act of fighting.
Yeah.
And these are people who, when they start, are like, I'll give it a shot, but I'm not sure.
Yeah.
Because they're scared. It's a normal human response.
Yeah.
And you've got to be, desensitized.
Mm.
And obviously a lot of martial arts clubs are not about desensitization because you wouldn't get the members. They've got to be sexy. They've got to have nice logos and beautiful things and, welcoming and lots of, it's not martial arts to me. It's just a business. It's not a martial art. It's not about fighting. It's not the reason I got into it for, certainly. The reason I did martial arts because I was scared of violence, and I learned karate, because that's what, I went to boxing. I didn't like. I got punched in the face. But I was lucky in that, I had some good instructors who sort of said, look, you can do competitions, but that's not real. You do know that.
Yeah.
And then obviously I found Muay Thai, and that's that is just like a massive wake up call for me, anyway.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you've been exploring. I mean, my gym's so Spartan, isn't it? You go there, we've got punch bags.
But I like the fact as well. Yeah. I also like the fact it's clean and it's ordered, which is what I sort of expect from somebody who's been in the military. Right?
Yeah.
And it has a certain amount of order to it and discipline to it, which is sorely missed in a lot of gyms.
Yeah.
People just respect you for who you are and the way you do things, and you don't sort of you don't bend the rules really, which is good because it teaches them that self-discipline. But I also like the fact you got like strength stones and shit like that. Really basic, old school sort of training implements.
Yeah.
And of course, you've recently taken up sort of historical European martial arts.
Yeah.
So you're now looking like I am. You're looking at, hang on a minute, we've got so much good shit in Europe. Why did I miss that? But even within HEMA, because I haven't been involved in it a couple of years now, you've got this other group. You've got like the sport HEMA, the people, the sort of nerds of it, who like all the, they like all of the movements and stuff, but they can't fight.
Yeah.
And even HEMA itself, even the sport of sword fighting has changed dramatically over the past few hundred years. When gladiatorial combat became the thing for sport and money, they took out thrusts.
Yeah.
You can't do thrusts because you'll kill the bloke straight away. It won't be much fun. You know what I mean?
Bob, is my camera still working? Can you see?
What's happening is your sound is fine, and every now and again you'll freeze. Oh, right, okay. So we had that little bit of a glitch there, but you finally sorted your camera battery out. Just want to say, obviously, I'd like to work on another one of these and go into more detail about some of the other elements of what you do, how you've set your club up in Dorchester, and the activities that people can do once we're back out of lockdown. because you've
Yeah,
got
of course.
a varied group of activities going on there, and it is a full-time gym, isn't it, in the truest sense of the word? So I guess you must be chomping at the bit to get back in there.
Oh mate, I can't wait. The longest we've ever been closed is about 2 weeks. So we closed on and off for about a year. It's been hard. I can't wait to get back there, to be honest with you.
Yeah, but you're one of the lucky ones. At least you managed to keep it going.
Yeah, I mean, as much as it's tough, and I've got my own views on these restrictions. We have done very well out of the grants. And then with the generosity of our members as well, quite a few of the members have carried on paying.
Yeah,
It's kept us running. I mean, obviously, I've seen loads of clubs shut down and selling kit and everything. So
it's true.
So yeah, we've been very lucky, very grateful.
Yeah. So all right then, Luke. Well, look, I'll close now. I'll say goodbye, and we'll get you on for part 2 next week sometime.
Yeah, cool. Sounds good, mate.
Yeah. All right. So thanks again, Luke.
Yeah, thanks very much, mate.
Soon.
Cool.
Take
See you
it easy,
later.
mate.
Bye.